Welcome back, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. You can tweet me, Larry_Kudlow. We're going to continue the conversation about the Trump economy in Davos and move on to a new issue, a tough issue, maybe a solvable issue, that being immigration. So we welcome back to the show Senator David Perdue, Republican of Georgia. Mr. Perdue, in my judgment at least, is an increasingly prominent Senate voice on the tax bill, for example, and now on the immigration bill. Senator, let me get you, first of all, thanks for coming back on. We appreciate it, sir. Let me get your quick take on the Trump economy and the Davos speech, because you were heavily involved in the tax reform discussion.
Well, good morning, Larry. I was and have been all year in 2017. Last year, in one of the first meetings in the White House, the president laid out his plan. His job, one, he said, was growing the economy. He wanted to focus on regulation, energy, and tax. And we did that last year. I think this tax bill, the more we see how people are responding to it, this is a generational change, and I think is going to be tremendously stimulative for our economy.
Yeah, you're a former businessman. Are you surprised at the speed with which these companies have reacted to the bill? I mean, I've never seen anything like it, sir.
Well, to be candid, I am too, Larry, and you and I talked about this offline a couple times last year. But I think this is part of what's going on. We've had 8 years where the federal government had its boot on the neck of small business and even large businesses in America with overregulation and an environment that was anti-business. So when you take that boot off like we did last year, we reversed 860 rules last year, Larry, and that has a tremendous impact. In fact, I think most of what we see in the market and what we see in the economy is a result of that relaxation of some of these outrageous and more onerous regulations.
How do you think President Trump did in Davos? I think he turned some heads, frankly. They may not love him, but he's got a success story. How did you read the Davos story?
You know, I've traveled the world a good bit, Larry, as a member of the Armed Services Committee, and I did last year as a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. And I can tell you, while people in America maybe have consternation about some of his tweets and that sort of thing, people in America love the agenda, and they love what's happening because of the agenda. And around the world, they see an America that is re-engaging after 8 years of disengagement. So I think President Trump in Davos, again, demonstrated he's growing into the job. He acted very presidential. His speech was right on the mark. And, you know, when he said America, he wants America first, it doesn't mean America alone. I think that sends a strong message to our allies and to others around the world.
That he will do business on the global stage.
Well, he said, you know, America's open for business. You know, all this stuff about protectionism and all that. Look, he knows that we're a country of traders. We have been for 230 years. He just wants a level playing field. He wants a fair opportunity for our workers and our businesses to compete. That's why this tax deal was so important, Larry, to get our tax rate more competitive and to eliminate this repatriation tax. I mean, look at what some of these big companies do. What did Apple say? $200 billion are coming back in unrepatriated profits. I mean, this is phenomenal.
Senator Perdue, I thought that was a fabulous line, but America first does not mean America alone. I wrote about it this weekend. The way I read it, Senator, I want to get your take on this. He's saying, look, we're going to stand up for American interests regarding all these trade deals, and he wants reciprocity where there are barriers. But I kind of think he's leaning or maybe messaging that he won't walk away from NAFTA, which is a very big deal in the business and financial worlds. And maybe he'll revisit the Pacific trade or maybe not. But then I kind of read it about NAFTA, that he's willing to do business. And he's willing to do business with Britain. He met with Prime Minister May and willing to do business with the EU. In other words, the vision of less globalism does not mean we're going to put protective walls around our country. We're going to work with folk.
Absolutely. This president has, although he sounded a little nationalistic during the campaign and some of his earlier comments could have been interpreted as protectionist, look at what he did with NATO. He told the European countries during the campaign and even last year, you need to increase your spending or we're going to back out of NATO. Well, we didn't have to back out of NATO, and look what happened. You know, they are increasing their spending on military for their own self-protection. He's doing the same thing right now on NAFTA. He's telling the members of NAFTA that this is what we have to have. We're beginning to say, hey, this has been unfair to the American worker for all these years. We need to fix it. He threatened to blow it up. I don't think he's going to do that. And I think what he's saying to all of our trading partners is not that just we're willing to trade with you. We want to trade with you, but we want to do it on equal terms.
Yeah, that's my read. Maybe you and I are being too optimistic or hopeful, but that is my read. And in conversations with him, and I know you meet with him regularly, I think he does want to do business. He's just, got to be tougher insofar as America's interests are concerned. There's nothing wrong with that. So these, walls that we all talked about, not immigration walls, but trade walls and global walls, I don't think it's going to come to pass. Let me move on. You are also now prominent in the discussion regarding immigration reform, which I think is a key issue. The president, I think Senator Perdue is extending an olive branch. He's saying, look, we're not going to send the dreamers home. We may have a path to citizenship over a period of time, but you're not going to just have DACA alone. It has to be part of an overall immigration, comprehensive immigration reform plan. And I noticed that you and Senator Tom Cotton are being very constructive on the president's ideas. Not all Republicans. Lindsey Graham, I guess, is not, and even Senator Ted Cruz is not. But walk us through your thinking on this, and do you reckon we can get a, 4 or 5 pronged immigration reform bill?
Well, first, I think the stars are lining up that this is a historic moment where both Democrats and Republicans are beginning to align, their interests are beginning to align behind solving a DACA situation, but also providing border security with a wall and ending chain migration in this diversity lottery, which is exactly the scope the president laid out. But first, Larry, as you've talked about in the past few years, GDP growth is a function of two things: population growth and productivity. Well, population growth in the United States is driven partly by our immigration process. We bring in 1.1 million legal immigrants a year, and only 70,000 of those are related to work. And so another 70,000 are their immediate family, the spouse, and their children. And then that means the other 950 are derivatives of the chain migration and a couple other categories. So Tom Cotton and I, a year ago, put in a RAISE Act that would move us to a merit-based immigration system like Canada and Australia. This president, just this week, has issued an earth-shattering, I believe, brilliant framework for a compromise here. I think he's been instinctive on immigration all along, and I think this is totally in line with the American people. I mean, if you look at some current polls that are out there, Larry, 79% want border security, which would include a wall, and 79% also think immigration should be based on skills. So 2/3 of America, this is shattering, 2/3 of America believe that a DACA solution should be had, but if and only if you solve or provide for border security with a wall and end chain migration and diversity lottery. So I think he's offered up a framework that could lead to a deal.
I do not understand what's wrong with a merit-based legal immigration system. Why is that so hard? And furthermore, you mentioned it briefly, what drives me crazy, Senator Perdue, is this diversity visa lottery system, which I think is absolutely nuts and violates the whole idea of a merit-based system. Now, I'm looking at the news in the last day or two, and I see Democrats and critics and so forth calling this idea, the whole idea, including the Dreamers, white supremacy and second and third class citizens. I just don't understand their logic, and it seems to me if we knuckle down, we can defeat that logic.
Well, we can, but this is a bit of hypocrisy because as early as Lyndon Johnson warned about chain migration when the current immigration law, which was signed in 1965, was put into law. Even Bill Clinton and Barbara Jordan in the early 90s, through an immigration commission, recommended that we go to a non-chain-based immigration system and move to a merit-based like Canada and Australia. So this is a proposition that Democrats have actually supported in years past. But in the president's compromise, we're not even trying to get to merit-based. We just want to end chain migration into diversity lottery, which, by the way, has been associated with at least one. Both of these processes have been associated with 2 acts of terrorism just in the past few months. So we know we have to fix that, and Democrats have supported in the past. So I believe this president has put forth a framework that should lead us in the Senate and the House to solve the DACA problem and at the same time provide for border security with a wall, end chain migration, and end this archaic diversity lottery.
You know, New York terrorists killed 8 people and, I don't know, injured another 15 or 20. He came through the so-called diversity visa lottery. I mean, that boils my blood as a New Yorker, but just generically, how can we let this happen? Senator David Perdue, can I urge, we can take a quick break. Will you stay with me for the second half?
Absolutely, Gary.
All right, you're terrific. We'll just take a very quick break and come back with some more questions about immigration, some other things. We've got Senator David Perdue, prominent senator from Georgia. I'm Kudlow. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. I'm Larry Kudlow. We're talking to the influential Republican senator, Senator David Perdue, in his first term from Georgia. Ms. Perdue, I want just a little bit more on immigration. I was on Sean Hannity radio yesterday. Sean's a very dear friend of mine. We were talking mostly about the economy in Davos, but we did get on immigration. Sean won't believe the president or any of you unless and until the money for the wall is appropriated. Now that money ranges, I don't know, I've seen $12 billion, I've seen maybe up to $25 billion. In your judgment, sir, as things stand now, how difficult would it be to get money appropriated for, a wall, a barrier, a fence, all the things that go into that?
Well, the president just called me yesterday from Air Force One talking about this very thing, and he has made it very clear there will not be a deal on DACA without border security and money for a wall. And so what Sean Hannity is talking about is, well, you can only appropriate for 1 year, and you can't appropriate all of this in 1 year because the theory is that you can't get all of this border security done in 1 year. Now, the president disagrees with that, but even with that, there are ways to secure this through a trust structure and all that has been used before, and the president has been very adamant that before any deal is done, that's got to be part of this deal. There will be no down payment as has been used by some of the Democrats. But there's another factor here, Larry, and that is that actually Chuck Schumer this past week, he offered up $25 billion if we do a deal. Well, that tells me a couple of things. Number one, the Democrats are now admitting that we want border security. They're seeing some of these polls where up to 80% of Americans want a wall. They know we have to have border security. So this president's not going to give in on that point.
I want a wall. I wasn't there half dozen years ago, sir. I'm there now. However it's constructed, some places you don't need the wall. Other places it's some kind of barrier, drones, law enforcement. But you know what? We're in national security problems, terrorist problems, immigration problems. Last 4, 5, 6 years, I've kind of changed my view. I think Donald Trump is the sensible guy now. One other one, my dear friend Ann Coulter and some others, they don't want citizenship. Now, the president said, most recently I saw him in Davos in an interview on CNBC. He said, look, there can be citizenship down the road. I think he mentioned 10 to 12 years, but I'm not certain about that. I think he really would prefer to start it out with some kind of legal status for the Dreamers. Where do you come out on that? Is that a big sticking point in the conservative part of the GOP?
Well, I think this is a matter of an opportunity that we have on the conservative side. I mean, you know that Tom Cotton and I staked out that side last year when we wanted to go to merit-based immigration and end this chain migration. We weren't involved. We didn't involve that bill with any DACA situation. The president has done what he should have done. Is he put this back in the lap of Congress, which is where it should have been. President Obama just kicked the can down the road with temporary status. So what the president is saying is that we'll offer up certainty for these people in that class. First of all, the DACA population are not kids anymore. They're mostly adults. And they really didn't. They're here illegally, but they are not here. They didn't violate a law on their own. Their parents did, and that's what we want to be sure of. The president has been adamant about, look, we'll deal on the DACA situation, but we want to ensure that we're not back here in 5 years with the same problem. And to do that, you have to secure the border to make sure people aren't coming in illegally and bringing their kids, and you have to end chain migration. So that's got to be part of the deal. So my point is, when has conservatives had this kind of opportunity to shut down the causative factors of the immigration problem we have right now? And if Democrats are really serious about solving DACA, how can they be against this reasonable framework that the president has laid out here?
Yeah, that should be that's a very makeable case. It seems to me it's a very practical case. Would you allow, in terms of legal immigration when we get there, should the system allow 500,000 a year, or it's been running 1 million immigrants a year for a long while? Would you put a cap on that?
Well, right now we have a system that just doesn't work. It's a country cap system, and they base it on percentages, so there's no upper limit. The number of people who come into the country is determined by the recent immigrants, Larry. That's the problem. And the type of people who are coming in the future are determined by current immigrants, not by policy or any legislative act. So the Immigration Act of 1965 that we've been working all these years, that immigration level then was 300,000. So this growth, this geometric growth in the number of immigrants is directly related to the chain dimension, where a worker can bring their spouse, their children, but they can also bring their adult children, their adult married children, their sibling, and their parents' parents. You can see how the chain runs. And so all we want to do is basically, nobody knows really what that number should be for constructive additive to the economy. We know that we need more skilled workers, Larry, and that's why we're trying to move toward a two-step process to hopefully get to merit-based. The president really wants a merit-based system here.
On the economy, you mentioned this near the top of the interview. So, a lot of Americans, on the southwest border, but even up in the Rust Belt states, believe that immigrants are taking away their jobs, and therefore they, very hostile to the idea. What's your in the final moments here? What's your take? What's your response to that, sir?
There are three dynamics. There are cases where that's happened over the last 40 years. Low-end wages have actually declined 2% because most of the people coming in under the current immigration system are low-skilled workers. The second thing, though, is we have high-skilled jobs that we can't find people to work. And we also have jobs like in the construction industry and the ag industries where you can't find workers. And so we've got a situation that we can solve all of that. The president laid out a great alternative to do that.
Thank you, Senator David Perdue of Georgia. Thanks very much for joining us, sir. Folks, stay with us after the break. The stock market. Ladies and gentlemen.